The other thing I'm doing, I'm not putting a white under highlight on every single chip because it's just too much. It's too much information and it doesn't really look natural anyways. I usually do them on all the big chips and then a few of the small chips. That makes it much more natural. And again, my white line isn't always solid. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it will be kind of broken up and speckly. And then sometimes where there's no dark chips, I'll put little white lights. Sort of like there's little imperfections in the metal at that point. Like, you know how metal, when it's starting to rust and corrode, sometimes it'll get bubbly first? So that's just the hint of those bubbles forming. The place where it's really important to have the white highlight, especially is if you have an edge of a thing and you got your little chips down here, that's a great place to have that white highlight. And then I'll also put a little bit of a white highlight on top of the rust because it just looks good. I'll kind of show that up here. But it's never a solid highlight. The other thing I do a lot too is if I kind of I'm a little heavy-handed, I just rub it off real quick. Like, I don't know, when I first started painting, everyone told, it was always a thing, don't ever touch your model. And I find nowadays, I touch my model so much. I've actually licked a model, like, because I couldn't, ah! It worked.
It's worth it.
No, I wouldn't suggest like constantly rubbing on your model because you will rub the paint off, right? But I mean, you know, come on. I've only met one person whose saliva was so acidic that it would actually take the paint off models. And just in his skin, his sweat, like he was like, I never touch any models because if I touch them, it will, like the paint will start coming off. Man, that sucks to be in this hobby. Can you imagine?
I've done like smears for like blood or whatever. Just
Yeah, I've actually in a pinch doing washes and stuff on like shoulder pads of guys. If it's not a competition piece, I'll put my wash over it, like a really dark wash, and I'll just rub my thumb across the top, and that's the highlight. And it never leaves a line. It's always this perfect blend. It's like, wow, I don't know what the deal is, but it works for me. There's lots of little things. That's the one thing I really like about having chosen a crazy profession like painting miniatures for a living, is you find out all these things that you can get away with just out of like sheer desperation. You're like, all right, I'm going to start losing money on this job. Let's figure out how to finish it, you know. And you do. It's like, so the key to these underlines is they need to be really thin. So that's another thing that really helps you out later on with doing freehand and stuff. I mean, like you do beautiful freehand. A lot of the things, it's just very fine lines, and you got to learn how to do that. And this is the best way to learn how to do it because you can't mess up, really. And it forces you to do it a lot. So, now I'd say only in a couple areas on this so far would this color register as being actually white on the model. And that's what I want. So, pass it around. So you can see how the little underline kind of gives it a little more depth. It looks better. It just looks cool, you know. It's like putting the glimmer on the armor. It just looks cool. It looks great.
Oh yeah, you mean like Charlie Russell? Is that Howard Remington, right? Remington or Russell?
I should just finish that base all in rust, and the guys from Shadows of Brimstone will be like, why did you have Rusty Rock?
Got iron content in
Yeah, it has, yeah. The Darkstone did it.
The white makes a big huge difference.
And like I said, glasses for us, and he's like a famous French painter and sculptor. And I was asking him, I said, so what? How do you wear like optivisor? Or he's like, if I cannot see it, I do not sculpt it. Like, that's a great philosophy for painting too.
Yeah. How old is he?
Under
35?
Yeah, he's pretty young. He's just a country bumpkin. Now what you can do too on this white, I usually leave it on my palette for a while, and well, for the whole session. And I always come back and hit some areas later to kind of reinforce it. Okay, so once that's on there, I'm going to do some, like, just interesting, I'm putting a little of the Sanguine base from P3. It's like a burgundy red. I just want to put that a little bit in a couple areas to kind of bump up my red saturation, give me a dark, rich color. And I'm going to keep that real close to those chips, though, because I don't want red running down the side of my building, because unless you had runny red paint, that wouldn't do that. It's kind of what I learned when painting faces. There's a lot of green tones in your skin, but if you paint a face and it looks green, you know, wrong is wrong. Even when sometimes right is wrong. So just because something technically has it in there doesn't mean that you have to go crazy with it. So then I'm gonna take a little of my darker color and those rust streaks that were coming down from the things. Now I'm gonna paint a line inside of the line that I already painted, but of a really dark color, so this will really show up. So if I screw this up, it's bad. But again, that's why I don't paint the entire line, I just paint the top part of it. I want it to look more wetter, like an older rust-ish. Now don't freak out if you miss your original lighter brown line, because it's okay to have a light brown line and a dark brown line and like different shades of brown lines coming down, because the rust streaks would be different, technically would be different. They weren't all created at the same time probably, or the paint failed in a particular way, so.
Yeah.
This is where we'll introduce a little bit of the blue. This is coal black from the Privateer Press, but any dark, like dark sea blue from Vallejo is really good. Any dark blue, like dark teal black. That's basically what it is. And I'm going to put this just in some spots at the tops of my chips to kind of deepen that color. Now the blue is definitely a contrasting color to the orangey brown, so they play well together. It works. Again, if it starts looking blue, I did it wrong. This one I'm painting kind of as a glaze and just kind of pushing it around once I get it on the model to kind of get it in the spots that I want. Some more white in my chips. Put some whites at the top of the border of this thing, just reflected light coming off the rust. Go over things just in spots though, to kind of change the hues of colors and add a little more rust or a little less rust. And a lot of times like this, if that base was vertical like this, you'd have all the areas in the rock that were broken away. That would obviously have some shadow area in them and stuff. If I was doing this, if this was on a model, I'd actually do the rust and then I'd come back in and paint those shadows, because some of the rust covers up those shadows. So why paint them and then cover them up and then retouch them up? I just paint them after the fact. It's kind of like painting a freehand and then painting the cape around it. Same thing. You know? So those are little time-saving things that I find, like when you're doing your metals and you put all the darker color on first. When I paint, I'll put 3 shades of color at once. So I know where my shadow is probably going to be. I can always change that on the fly, so it's like shadow, mid-tone, highlight, all in one. Like, you know, just go from color to color. So that's the difference. But that's just from working in the industry and having to do things super fast. You know? Neither way is perfect. Mine's a little faster, and so it might be a little rougher in the long run. But for miniatures that are, you know, done for pay, you got to finish in a timely manner, otherwise you are toast. Financially, at least. So yeah. So any questions or answers? Sweet. Now we can go to your class.